Welcome back into the Lions 24/7 podcast. I am Tyler Donahue, joined from Iowa City by Daniel Gallen. He's posted up late night at Kinnick Stadium for us, working hard as always, hopping on the postgame podcast. And from a number 2 national ranking to finishing October under 500, Penn State suffers its second consecutive 1-point loss. It's a 25-24 defeat at Iowa. They've lost 4 consecutive games by a combined margin of 14 points against this Iowa team, Northwestern, UCLA, and Oregon going back to late September. A shocking spiral continues into the bye week. Some top 5 opponents back-to-back await beyond that. And bowl eligibility now very much in question suddenly for a team that we thought was going to play deep into January. Daniel, welcome back in. We got to stop meeting like this on Saturday nights after losses like this. Penn State was up 21-10 with less than 20 minutes left. As I said, we have seen the end of Penn State football in October, certainly in October to forget, but one that's going to be very memorable because of the losses, because of the firing of James Franklin. And this team will get to that November 1st matchup in Columbus without owning a single victory over a Big Ten opponent or a Power 4 conference opponent. How do you want to start here, my friend?
Well, you painted a pretty bleak picture there, Tyler, but I do think things are pretty bleak for this team right now. You think back to the bye week in September, and we were talking about this, or even in the preseason, we talked about this 4-game stretch as a really important one for Penn State. When you talk about having the chance for the marquee win against Oregon, and then having the opportunity to test yourself on the road at Iowa. And then we thought that there were a couple gimmies in the middle with UCLA and Northwestern, and about how this could set you up for your second bye week and going into Ohio State, and then like the stretch run, and it's all just blown up pretty much. You lose 4 straight in pretty dismal fashion. Pretty heartbreaking fashion, pretty painful fashion. And you just end up in the spot where, yeah, you're right. Like, bowl eligibility is a question mark. You got to win 3 of the next 5. And when you really put it like that, 3 of the next 5, it's tough. So we can talk more about those specifics later. I know no one wants to think about Thanksgiving weekend at Rutgers right now. And what that weekend could possibly mean. But if you're Penn State, you're in a really bad spot. You had the opportunity to maybe make something of it tonight, and you couldn't.
This is Penn State's first 4-game losing streak since the beginning of that COVID-shortened season back in 2020. They ultimately started 0-5 before rebounding with 4 consecutive wins. This is a Saturday, Daniel, that started with James Franklin joining the ESPN Game Day crew and kind of giving his version of how things are moving forward. He's gone. He's out of the picture. And yet we have some of the same problems, and you start to focus a little bit more on the coordinators on a game like this. We'll talk about the offense and the defense. But before we get there, I want to utilize your insight because you were feet on the ground very early in Kinnick Stadium. You beat Penn State to the stadium. So on the field for pregame, you had a chance to get pretty close to some of those players, the coaching staff. I know Pat Kraft, the athletic director, was on the field as well. Give us the mood, the attitude that you picked up from Penn State before things kicked off, because we were wondering about it all week. We talked about it on our pregame podcast on Thursday. How would this team rally? How would they react to all the feelings of guilt and sadness after Franklin's firing? And then beyond that, what did you pick up in postgame when you got face-to-face with players and heard from Terry Smith?
Yeah, I think pregame, the one thing that stood out to me was that there wasn't a lot of juice. I think part of it probably had to do with the pregame production at Kinnick. We were down there on the field, and for a pretty decent amount, like, there wasn't really music playing over the PA. So it was just the Penn State players out there going through the motions a little bit, going through their different warm-ups. And then when the music on the PA started playing, then maybe it picked up slightly. But yeah, I think that it didn't really feel like there was a lot of juice. Maybe it picked up a little bit as time went on. But I think that Penn State was facing an uphill climb here at Kinnick Stadium post game. Some downtrodden guys, some guys who were pretty unhappy. I think Terry Smith was very, I think, downtrodden, I think would be a way to do it. But also, I think you could still see a little bit of that edge with what he was saying, how he was saying it. And so I think moving forward, this is a team that if they want to win games, if they want to make anything of this year, it's really going to fall on their shoulders. It's that like no one's coming to save you type of thing right now. And this is a team that these first couple times they haven't been able to rise to that occasion.
Yeah, there's a hope out there that there's going to be a savior that shows up as the next head coach of this team. That won't happen until late November, December, probably. Right now, there's nowhere to hide, and you've got what you've got in that building until you start getting rid of some guys, perhaps, and then you change some things there. We'll get to that a little bit later because Terry Smith has a lot to evaluate here with the bye week leading up to the trip out to Ohio State. But let's focus in on this game. It was one that I mentioned, Penn State up 21-10 with about 20 minutes to go.
I have one more
Yeah,
pregame thing. We can just do it off the top because I just wrote about it on Lions 24/7, and it was
right.
A big subject pregame where they get off the bus and all the guys come in and they're all wearing these gray shirts that say if in big letters on the front with the Penn State logo. I think some a lot of some sleuthing I think going on trying to figure out what it meant. I know that there's a poem with some Paterno ties that named if that people were pulling up. Mark Wogenrich from Penn State on SI, he checked in and they said Penn State said it was a motivational thing. And then post game, Terry Smith and the players that we talked to, they said that it means like the endless possibilities. Like if you do this, if you play harder, if you do this, everything that you can get out of it. I think that it was, an interesting note to hit going in, especially when you consider that, especially coming out of Northwestern. I mean, this is a team that doesn't really have anything left to play for except pride. You think that they're a team that can just kind of strap it up and go out there and not really worry about things. And I think that is what that leans into a little bit. I do think that it's definitely like a forward-looking message, but I think it can also be a pretty apt backward-looking message when you think about this team. And I think there's going to be a lot of what ifs that define 2025 Penn State. Like, if they get some different guys in the portal, if they address some needs, if they maybe take a different tact coming into the season in terms of messaging, things like that. If Drew Aller doesn't throw that interception against Oregon, if they beat Oregon, things look a lot different. And so I think there's a little bit of poetry there, from Penn State in terms of something that is forward looking. And, I think I understand it, but it's something that retrospectively can, be applied and really sum up a lot of things about this program this year.
Yeah, you do it a forward-thinking way like Terry Smith wants to. You think about limitless possibilities, what he discussed. If you look back in the rearview mirror right now for Penn State, you're forlorn about missed opportunities and what has gone awry so quickly for a promising season. Daniel, we're going to get to the offense in just a little while. There's plenty to talk about there, quarterback change. But I wanted to get to the defense first because they had a nice start, a momentum-building start where Zakee Wheatley gets his hand on the football, one-handed interception, the takeaway king strikes again. I think he's consistently been the best player on this defense now over a 7-game sample size. Zakee Wheatley as a tackler, as a guy who can make some plays, he's up there with anybody on this team, probably along with Kaytron Allen as terms of what you're getting on a game-to-game basis right now. But it was another crappy finish for this defense. Ultimately, it's been a real blemish overall in the entire season is watching what this defense has been unable to do when it matters most. And as Terry Smith put it in his post-game press conference, quote, "We can't get stops when we need stops." Daniel, you go back to the game against Oregon. Penn State led 24-17 in overtime. They need a defensive stop to get a win. They don't get it. You go back to the game against Northwestern. They're up 21-15 with less than 5 minutes left. You need to stop in front of your home crowd. You don't get it. You lose that game. Tonight, 5-point lead over Iowa with less than 5 minutes left. You need to stop. Instead, you give up 75 yards on 2 plays, and you lose the lead, and you lose the game. the UCLA games in there, but this defense was so overwhelmed that they never actually had a lead to blow. They actually made a stop late, but Jim Knowles' defense so far has been, I think it's just about as disappointing as anything we've witnessed in these 7 games. And when you start to stack up the way it's been unable to close things out, not once, not twice, but now 3 times with a late lead, part of this 4-game losing streak that's been so painful for everybody, you can understand why people are laughing in Columbus right now, and why people here at Penn State, who were really sold that this was going to be the climax of the all-in movement from this past offseason and maybe that missing link to get to the national championship. I think most fans right now would trade Jim Knowles for Tom Allen's defense, for Manny Diaz's defense, for Brent Pry's defense. And that just is so far removed from the reality that we anticipated by midseason.
Yeah, I mean, I think in my 5 years on the beat, this is probably the most underperforming that the defense has been. When I think about it, I know that in 2021 there were a couple weird games where like Illinois ran all over Penn State, and then but I mean it's just like consistent basis from Penn State this year, just not being able to get off the field when they need to. Like I think that both sides of the ball failed in the gotta have it situations tonight. But like the defense, like you giving up a 67-yard run to the quarterback who, Kirk Ferentz, I don't know if it was intentional. He drops a little salt in the wound where he mentions that Mark Gronowski isn't 100% yet. He had that knee injury earlier this year. And maybe if I think the joke was like, if he's 100%, he houses that run.
Nico Gronowski, you mean?
Yeah, pretty much. And so like just to give that up, like a 2-play 75-yard drive, like that's crazy. And Penn State in this game, the defense gave up a 2-play 1-yard touchdown drive and then a 2-play 75-yard touchdown drive. So, short yardage, long yardage, like it just wasn't working tonight. And it's just like baffling, to see this over and over again. Iowa was hunting out Dom DeLuca, running at Dom DeLuca again. He had a couple of rough plays where he couldn't make like an individual play, and he tried to arm tackle someone, got ran through. But at this point, like it really does feel like a failure of scheme. That especially against the running quarterbacks that this keeps happening, and that you're not protecting one of your players or working around that, because like that's what coaching is. I know that like you can say what you want about Dom DeLuca as a player, and I think that we all know that he has limitations and that he has a good story, but I do feel like he's being failed by the coaching right now. The phrase coaching malpractice has become very en vogue on the message boards and on Penn State social media these past 3 weeks. But I think that's the one area, where it really stands out, where it's like, why are you letting this happen to this guy over and over again? Why aren't you trying something different? Why aren't you scheming something different? It's just really rough to see. And I don't think there was really any point during this game where it was like, oh yeah, they're going to buckle down and get a stop here. Or, Iowa can't move the ball. The only time Iowa couldn't move the ball was when they tried to pass. And, that didn't work for them. 7.4 yards per carry for them tonight. They came in averaging 4.6, which is fine, but it was 50th in the country, like not world beating or anything. Just it's bad. It's, I think, a pretty big failure for Penn State this year on the defensive side of the ball.
We've said a few times, look, with the salary he's getting, with the history he has, Jim Knowles, pretty good chance to stay here after the season with whoever shows up. I'm not sure anymore, because a lot of these players are going to get reset. His roster is going to get reset on defense. I mean, we've heard how hard it is to apparently get it into the heads of the players that you have to get on the same page. Are you going to have to go through this song and dance again next year? We just saw Pat Kraft in this athletic department, one way or another, swallow a lot of money to say goodbye to James Franklin. It's a lot. It's a lot of money for Jim Knowles in the coordinator grand scheme of things, but it's not a lot of money. It's another drop in the bucket, essentially. So we'll see where that lands. But again, crazy conversation to be had right now. And what is so brutal is the complementary football has lacked for this team all season long. And you saw a flash of it earlier. Zakee Wheatley's interceptions followed by a touchdown drive. But that failure to contain Gronowski, who's not even at full capacity, and to give up a touchdown so quickly, that all of a sudden puts the pressure on your first time starting quarterback on the road in this environment at Kinnick at night. That followed a 16-play, 61-yard drive that was more than 8 minutes long. You only got a field goal out of it. So, but 24-19 looked a lot better than 21-19. And I see they're turning the lights on you in Kinnick right now. But to me, that was the biggest issue there, the lack of complementary football. We've seen it all year. But to follow a long drive like that, where your defense spent 8 minutes of game action watching your offense control things, watching your offense put points on the board, the way you respond is 2 plays later, that lead is gone. And that's really hard to take right now. Quick notes on defense. Xavier Gilliam was working through some injury issues, but I thought he played overall pretty good game, got into the backfield a bit. He had the blocked field goal that led to Elliott Washington's touchdown as time expired in the first half, sent his team to the locker room on the upswing. Zariah Fisher was dealing with an injury along the way. That's never good to see for him, considering how much time injuries have cost him over the course of his career. He didn't have Jalen Harvey today because he was listed as out before the game. So it's a depleted defensive end group. Dani Dennis Sutton hasn't really shown up in the way that we projected he would through these Big Ten games so far in terms of production and impact. And right now, it's just you look across the defense, and whether it's the coaching or the players, there's just not a lot of performances to be proud of right now, especially when it comes down to the final moments of these games where you're deciding wins and losses and where your team is on a trajectory. But let's get over to offense, because this defense, because they're laps late, did put the pressure on Ethan Grunkemeyer. He finished this game with 93 passing yards. He completed 15 of 28 passes. That's about 54%. Had 2 interceptions, one of which you can live with, basically better than a punt. Pinned Iowa back deep on a 3rd and long, kind of chucked it down there, got intercepted on a great play by the Iowa defensive back. The other was a really rough one where he forced a pass, went off Luke Reynolds, was tipped and intercepted, almost taken all the way back for a pick 6. It did set up an Iowa touchdown a couple of plays later. And ultimately, he just did not appear to be comfortable at any point in this game. I thought he did some good things with his legs. He moved the chains a couple different times on 3rd down situations. I think Terry Smith pointed out, to his credit, we didn't see pre-snap penalties. Remember the last time a backup quarterback had to play in Kinnick Stadium under the lights? It was one of the more brutal things we've ever seen from a QB and an offense. This time around, you didn't have that. It seemed like you did a good job at the line of scrimmage. But, man, this pass attack right now, and I shouldn't really call it an attack, should I, Daniel? This passing game having issues. And Terry Smith had a pretty pointed comment in his opening statement, quote, "We continue to not be able to throw the ball downfield or even throw the ball in the intermediate zone. So we've got to get that fixed." I mentioned 93 passing yards. No one on this team had 20 receiving yards. This was the 3rd time in 4 weeks, Daniel, where they get to halftime and they don't have 50 passing yards. 4 consecutive weeks, they have fallen short of 70 passing yards in the first half of the game. Let's remind everyone, the first 3 games, that's a guy who started 30-plus games in his career and was with the same offensive coordinator for a 2nd straight year in Drew Aller. What's going on, Daniel?
Yeah, you talk about Terry Smith being the truth teller, and when we're all in there, and he says like, "Oh, we can't throw the ball down the field," and in your head you're kind of like, okay, like, yeah, like we've heard this before or whatever, and then he's like, "Yeah, we're not even hitting the intermediate," and then like you kind of perk up where you're like,
Yeah,
oh, okay, like that's a new criticism to have on the record, and it shows that he's acknowledging that he's watching the same thing we are. When you look at what Penn State is doing. But yeah, I mean, you talk about not being able to generate, big passing plays. And like you talked about it, that field goal drive, 16 plays to go 61 yards in 8.5 minutes.
that was Iowa football. That was Hawkeye's offensive football right there.
I was going to say it's appropriate for this matchup and like this environment. But then like you go earlier, like that touchdown drive that on the first 10 plays, 35 yards, 5.5 minutes. And it did feel like there was a little bit of like slowing the game down a little bit. It felt like that they were in the huddle for a while. It felt like that they ran the play clock down a little bit. And, Grunkemeyer was able to make those adjustments, get in and out. And so that makes sense from like a, game plan. Like, hey, like we're in a hostile environment. We got this first time starting quarterback. Our program like just got blown up this week. Let's shorten the game. But like at some point, like you need to hit big plays. Like, you need to hit a knockout blow, especially like you said, when you're not playing complimentary football. Like, what's the point of taking 8.5 minutes off the clock to get a field goal when
Mhm.
it takes a minute to give up 7? And so I think that it just has both these, they're just so off. And this offense is this very inefficient, just so like tough to watch. Like 3.6 yards per play, like that's a really, really rough number, for you against an Iowa team that, like, this isn't the Iowa from 2021, or even these past couple of years where it's just been so suffocating. So it's rough. I mean, I you can take this wherever you want, but like the one thing that also stands out to me, and I made a quip about this on social media, probably a little too snarky, but like, it's 3rd and 5, less than 90 seconds left in a game.
Yeah.
It's gotta have it, and you run Nick Singleton up the middle for 1 yard and then have to use a timeout. Like, then that puts you in that 4th and 4. Like, not even really like if you get the 4th and 3, 4th and 2, fine, give the ball to Kaytron Allen and be done with it. But just to end up like in that spot, it just felt like what are you trying to do? Like, what do you want to accomplish here? That was really, really tough to watch. And it was very similar to what we've seen at the end of a couple of these other games when we talk about, like, we don't want to pile on Nick Singleton,
Mhm.
but there's been a couple times these past couple of weeks where it's a key sequence in the game and the ball ends up in his hands or he's on the field, and it's, you think about, what if it was Kaytron Allen? What if it was someone else? What if you could throw the ball 10 yards down the field, to get it to someone? But yeah, just rough, rough watch,
I mean,
for this offense.
Daniel, in that moment, you're right. You turn to Nick Singleton, and in some years that sounds fantastic, but on this night and on this season, it's tough to take on. Like you said, do or die, 3rd and 5 situation. To that point, Singleton had 5 carries for 14 yards. He was under 3 yards per carry on the evening. He finished with 6 carries for 15 yards. And you look at his body of work now. His longest run against Oregon, Northwestern, and Iowa is 7 yards across those 3 games. 7-yard run is his longest. He had a 13-yard run out at UCLA. Didn't do much with the rest of it, touches out there. But I do have a question for you, because you were watching it in real time and you saw kind of maybe how the offense was reacting. Jackson Smolik entered the chat tonight, and it was his first time getting into a game since September 23, when he got 2 snaps against Delaware when backup Bo Perbula was bloodied up for a couple plays. He came in, handed the ball off a couple times. So this was really his first time being involved in a game that mattered when it mattered. And he was in there quite a bit, more than we expected. I know in the first couple possessions, he had 4 total snaps, and that doubled his career snap total. But he never threw the ball. He never was passed. It was run, 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 run. He picked up a couple first downs on a 2nd and 3 and on a 2nd and 1. Both of those were 3-yard gains. His other plays, 0-yard rush and a 3-yard loss. Wasn't all that effective. If this was supposed to be the Bo Perbula of this offense, he's not Bo Perbula. None of us expected him to be, and it didn't look like that today against the Iowa defense. But did you think that there was a net negative impact on the offense because of what it maybe meant for Ethan Grunkemeyer going to the sideline, going to wide receiver, when you're maybe trying to find a groove for this young quarterback? I may be reading into that too much. Maybe Jackson Smolik getting involved shows that they all of a sudden have a fearful lack of playmakers and they feel like their backup quarterback's an answer. He ended up in the medical tent and into the locker room, I think, by the end of this game, right?
Big cast on his left hand.
So, I mean, all of a sudden, Jack Lambert, 3rd-year walk-on, could be your primary backup behind Ethan Grunkemeyer. We'll talk about that next week. But, Daniel, what did you make of kind of that and the impact on offensive flow?
Yeah, I am generally of the mind that, like, if you believe in your QB1, you never take the ball out of his hands. And that was my attitude when Aller and Perbula were here. Especially when, like, the one thing I'll say is that with Smolik coming in, like, it felt more in the flow than it ever felt with Perbula coming in. I think I'll give it that. And I think also it's the fact that, like, Grunkemeyer is a blank slate to work with, where We didn't really know what to expect. He's not someone who we view in the same way that we viewed Drew Aller, where you really did feel like the ball needed to be in his hands at all times because of the type of talent that we thought he could be and the things that we thought he could do on the field. So I did think it felt like it felt good because you've got an Iowa team that's preparing for a quarterback that they've never seen before. And then you throw in another quarterback that they've never seen before on top of it. I think from that perspective, in terms of game planning, maybe catching them a little bit by surprise, I liked that wrinkle. But I do think, like you said, Smolik never threw the ball. So he's out there by the time, like maybe, I forget what snap it was, but it was like they ran like a speed option to the left on a third down, short side of the field, and he got stopped for no gain, I think. And then there was another play where he's out there and hands the ball to Kaytron Allen going to the right side, and Iowa is there to stop it. I think some of the triple option aspects of it, when you had a guy going in motion and he pulls the ball and goes to the outside, then pitches it. I think that's really slick. Very partial to the triple option personally. But I just think that overall, it just goes back to that thing where it got predictable. When he's out there in the second half, it's going to be a run. Like you didn't add that other dimension to it. Like there were like the building blocks where it's like, okay, like he's not just there to pitch it. Like he has the athleticism to keep it. Then it's okay. Like it's not just going to be Kaytron Allen. There's going to be another back involved. And then, I do think too, maybe if he's out there, maybe you somehow get the ball from his hands to Grunkemeier's hands, build that layer on top of it, build the throwing layer on top of it. It just didn't really feel like they built it out over the course of the game for it to be really effective. I do think it was like an inspired wrinkle. But then, him getting hurt also shows like why, for everyone who's clamoring for that quarterback running game, that backup quarterback, even like, look, you just saw Aller, reportedly break his ankle last week on a run. Like that's the risk that you run when you do that. So yeah, I thought it was an inspired wrinkle, but it didn't feel fully fleshed out and fully thought out. And I think that ended up hampering them a little bit in the second half.
To me, it looked like something that would have been great to do against Villanova. Great to do against Nevada. See how it worked. Get a sense for what you want to keep in the playbook, what you want to take out of the playbook. You're already having a hard enough time breaking in a first-time quarterback on the road in this environment with a lot of pressure on the program. All of a sudden, you're doing it with two guys, with Jackson Smolik out there too.
I mean, I was like, they were out there, and it's like you got Smolik, Grunkemeyer, Allen, and Singleton on the field all at the same time. And to me, that's intriguing. Like in terms of the options, it's just that, like, I just didn't. It just, like I said, did not feel like that they built like off of it in order to make it as dangerous as it could have been.
It was intriguing until you actually started to see it utilized, and then it was less intriguing and less intriguing. And he doesn't have the agility and burst that Bo Perbula has. He doesn't have the strength and size that Tyler Warren had in a similar kind of role. And that's not to take anything away from Jackson Smolik, who's still an above-average athlete at the quarterback position, but to lean on that and this, not to lean on it, but to kind of go to that repeatedly in this game. Seemed to lose its luster pretty fast. I think if they did lean on anybody, it was clearly Kaytron Allen. He finally got his featured moment at running back. We talked about Nick Singleton in that moment, but he had 6 carries for 15 yards in the game. 28 carries, a career high for Kaytron Allen. I believe his high before this was 21 carries maybe, so way beyond his biggest workload as a college running back. 145 yards, that is a new career high. I think he had 144 against FIU back in mid-September. 2 touchdowns in the game. He was over 5 yards on average. And Terry Smith noted that none of his carries, all 28 of them, none of them resulted in negative yardage. He said, he was getting forward. He also credited the offensive line for not getting him blown up in the backfield. But let's face it, that's kind of Kaytron Allen's reputation of not losing yards, turning 2-yard gains into 4- and 5-yard gains, helping your quarterback out, helping the offensive plan out with the down and distance stuff. And in the process, he moved into third place all time for Penn State's rushing leaderboard. Went past Tony Hunt. He only looks up at Evan Royster and Saquon Barkley now on that list. at number 3 in Penn State history, despite sharing that load and 50-50 essentially with Nick Singleton. Let me ask you this, Daniel. If you have this game plan where Kaytron Allen's the centerpiece a bit like this, and Drew Aller is your quarterback, do you win tonight?
I think you're in a very similar game where like the Drew Aller in the offense that we saw all this year. Like, I don't necessarily think that you win. I didn't necessarily see like Ethan Grunkemeyer miss any throws where you say Drew Aller makes that throw.
I've got a better question to pose. If this was your game plan and this was your strategy and approach with Kaytron Allen against Northwestern, do you win that game?
Probably.
How about the UCLA game?
The defense was too bad, and
the defense was very bad.
Yeah, that game I don't really think the offense could have done. It's like, yeah, maybe you give it to Kaytron Allen on that 4th and 2, and that's different. Yeah. But the defense makes that too hard to be a real what if.
That's fair. I think that the last 2 possessions we saw Penn State on the field, though, we didn't see much of Kaytron Allen at UCLA, and so again, not being treated like a feature centerpiece part of this. I don't know if you caught up with Kaytron after the game. I know that he was available. I don't know if Mark was over there rather than you. If you did, what did you hear from him? If you didn't, what do you think this performance maybe means as Penn State goes into the bye week, huddles up? Because Terry Smith was pretty candid going into this game that they wanted to shift it towards Kaytron more often. We heard it from Franklin a bit, didn't really see it come through on the game field much with him. Now he's been fired, and if you're looking for significant differences, yeah, Kobe Howard was out there. He caught a 15-yard pass for a first down, so that was different. But the biggest difference to me, post James Franklin right now, was what they did with Kaytron Allen, what they did not do with Nick Singleton, and how they really made it an emphasis for number 13. There's Mark Brennan in the background in Iowa City. These guys working hard. Did he just flip us off too? I think he waited until you. Anyways,
I'll never tell. That was off the record. No, with Kaytron Allen, I didn't make it over, or I briefly swung by him, but Grunkemeyer came out right when I got over there, and I wanted to spend the whole time with Grunkemeyer to get that full picture for a story. The one feedback that I did hear that I assume some of our other colleagues will write about, I wasn't there, so I'm not going to take their reporting, but it did sound like that. Allen has been very emotional, and this has been a very hard year, both in terms of football and not football. I'm not sure what outlets that'll be in, but just keep an eye out if you want to read more. But I think that moving forward, like the fact that you saw a willingness to commit to him, I think that maybe that's an identity that you can build off of. Maybe that this is something that you can hang your hat on, and the type of player that you can really build around as you go forward. Another comparison to the last time I covered a college football team where the coach got fired in season, actually was in this building right after that happened 10 years ago. But like Maryland, like they built, the first couple games, like when Randy Edsall got fired and the game where Randy Edsall got fired, like they built it like Perry Hill's the quarterback. We're going to run him into the ground. Like he's going to be the guy. Like everything's going to go through him. He had like 3 straight 100-yard games. And he's basically like a glorified linebacker, playing quarterback. Not the real linebacker. That was 2012. But like, and that was like a thing where it's like, okay, we're hanging our hat on this moving forward. And so I think that you can do something with Kaytron Allen because can't hang your hat on your defense right now. Can't hang your hat on a wide receiver. Can't hang your hat on a tight end or quarterback. Can't really hang your hat on the offensive line right now, even though I think they were pretty good tonight. No Venga Ioane. But so like,
there's not a lot of hat hangers left.
Yeah, like it's
in the situation.
It's got to be like Kaytron Allen.
I think, yeah, I guess generally moving forward, he is the guy that I think, along with Venga Ioane, who has helped his NFL draft stock this year on offense. I don't know if anyone else has. Venga was out this game. You're missing the best offensive lineman from your plan. But afterwards, Terry Smith gave a pretty quick answer on it, but he said that Venga would be available moving forward. So it doesn't sound like a long-term issue for the big lineman. Let's close here, Daniel, in terms of what's next. Immediately in front of this team, they've got a bye week, their second bye week of the season. Last time they tucked away at 3-0, and we all said, okay, they got to show up and be ready for Big Ten ball. Still not ready for Big Ten ball. But coming out of that bye week, they've got they've got Ohio State on the road, number 1 team in the country. Come back home to play number 3 Indiana. Bowl eligibility, like we said, very much in doubt. Maybe you get to play like a MAC team in Detroit the day after Christmas, if that excites anybody. But Daniel, obviously the rest of the journey looks way different than anyone thought it would coming out of the second bye week. Maybe you can pull off an upset, salvage something out of this season, whether it's Ohio State, Indiana, give Terry Smith a moment, give these players a moment, but it's hard to bank on that happening right now. In the immediate future here, staff decisions, depth chart decisions. Terry Smith told us he was basically just trying to survive, keep the team intact, keep their emotions in a good place this week. That's going to change in the bye week. I don't know if Andy Kotelnicki coaches another game for this team. I don't know if it's an assistant coach, a position coach that doesn't coach another game for this team. What do you make of what Terry Smith has to do right now when it comes to his staff and to his personnel?
Yeah, to start with the depth chart, I mean, it kind of went the way that I thought it would, in terms of no real wholesale changes. Like the starters on defense were all the usual suspects. AJ Harris was back after we didn't see him in the second half against Northwestern. And then on offense, like the only real change was you had TJ Shanahan starting at left guard, with Venga Ioane out and not making the trip. But otherwise, it was, pretty par for the course. I mean, yeah, Kobe Howard played and had an uptick. Tysier Denmark played. They're on the field together at one point too. And so I think that maybe coming out of the bye, like this is when you can sit down and sink your teeth into things. This is when you can look at what's working, what isn't working. If you're Terry Smith, figure out who you want to be really moving forward. Like honestly, like the Smolik integration, it's probably something I would have expected to see more after the bye week, given the way that I kind of expected things to go. But maybe we'll see more I don't know if creativity is even the right word, because people don't want creative at this point.
They're running out of quarterbacks. They're running out of quarterbacks to get creative with too.
People just want stuff to work. Like that's just what it is now.
Efficiency, creativity, efficiency needs to be your bedrock, and they have completely locked it on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, so I think that coming out, of the bye, like this is when you really need to reevaluate everything, honestly, top to bottom. This is where you can have some of those, tough conversations, like telling the truth, check your feelings in at the door, and figure out what you can do to win as many games as you can in these final 5 that, where hopefully you can get to a point where like you're not spending Christmas night in Detroit. Like maybe you're leaving the day after Christmas to go somewhere, maybe a little warmer than Detroit too. So yeah, I don't really know in terms of what changes like you can make, what changes you're willing to make. I do think that, Pat Kraft, opened up the money pit a little bit with firing James Franklin. Even though based on what James Franklin said on game day this morning, sounds like some of that might be offset in the coming years. But like, how much more money do you want to shovel, into the money pit, in terms of making these changes? So I really don't know like where you go from here. I know that's not really what I know people want, they want names, they want blood, like all that. But when you look at this, feels like a team that is, for all the staffing that they have, it does feel kind of like a skeleton crew a little bit, where it's kind of like, oh, we got to like really get these guys to the finish line somehow. And how are you going to be able to still teach, still develop in this sort of situation? I think that this bye week is where, if you're Terry Smith and whoever is in that inner circle with him, like Andy Kotelnicki, Jim Knowles, whoever else, like you really go up to the 40,000 foot view and say, like, we have to look at everything, figure out what will work best for this team right now. And then you go from there and you narrow it down and say, okay, what's going to be best for the player right now, for this player? What can we do for this player that can help us? But yeah, I mean, we'll see coming out of the bye. That travel roster might be interesting. Travel roster, no Quentin Martin. That was, I think, the one notable. He wasn't listed on the availability report, just didn't come. So
Yep.
that's another thing to note as you move forward. And we'll see what that travel roster looks like when we get to Columbus in a couple weeks.
Martin's been a complete non-factor, has not entered any games. Top 24/7 prospect last year, guy that showed some promise and a little bit of freshman work, but again, a non-factor so far, just like pretty much everybody else in that running back room, but not even making the trip.
No RB3 played again tonight. Corey Smith had a nice, showed some burst on kick return. Cam Wallace botched a kick return. And, I know that we thought that it was, in the preseason, like, oh, this team's so stacked. Like RB3 is one of the top storylines, and everything Stan Drayton has said about it, everything James Franklin said about it, kind of pumping the brakes and, a lot of trepidation that's played out.
We thought a lot of things, about 2 months ago, didn't we? We thought a lot of things about this. And we thought this coordinator combination could be the best in America, and with James Franklin out of the equation, didn't look good at all on both sides. And so we'll see. I wouldn't be shocked if in the next 48 hours someone's dismissed, someone who we've come to know as a key player on this or a key figure on the staff. If they're out of the building, I would not be surprised by that. If it's a measure of accountability, sending a message, trying to restart a portion of your team. But at the end of the day, the numbers of games are dwindling for a lot of people in that building right now with their Penn State careers. It took another step forward today with a 25-24 loss to Iowa. Daniel doing the heavy lifting in Iowa City alongside Mark Brennan. Appreciate you both. Get home safe. We'll regroup next week. It's a bye week, so we'll cut down on our podcast that we put out. But want to encourage everybody, the coaching search is really just getting underway. We'll continue to cover that over at Lions247.com. I know that's become the main show in town now. I think it hit 1 million views on our thread. So 60% off gets you VIP access. Follow that. Check out our coverage coming out of this Iowa matchup as well, all across the site.
I mean, I got to say, like that thread, like if you're not a member, like you're missing out on a lot. Like I was traveling all day Friday. I went out with our guy, David Eichelt, in Cedar Rapids on Friday night, and I got back to the hotel and I spent maybe like 40 minutes just trying to catch up on everything. I know that when I get in bed tonight and try to catch up, I'm just not going to be able to. We had it turned into a Nebraska in-game thread last night. Like it's a lot of fun. I love our community. They're great, and you can still get in the door for everything that's coming up. And that's not even to mention the great work that you're doing, Tyler, with keeping everything moving forward.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun conversation. If you know where to look, there's also some really good insight and nuggets on what's going on behind the scenes with this coaching search. We've been doing some reporting as well. But for now, we're going to step aside from this podcast. Big thanks to Daniel Gallen and Mark Brennan for getting it done out at Kinnick Stadium. I'm Tyler Donahue here in Happy Valley. Thanks for watching or listening to the Lions 24/7 podcast.